Hey everybody, today we're going to make one of my favorite meals, fish chowder. It's a New England style soup that uses evaporated milk. It uses potatoes, onions, corn. We're going to use haddock, but you could definitely use cod or another flaky white fish for this. And about half a stick of butter, which I have heating up in my pan over here over medium-low heat. You're going to need 3 potatoes, medium size, peeled. These are russet potatoes, and they give off a lot of starch when they're cooking, which helps thicken the soup. You don't want to use waxy potatoes like Yukon Golds because they hold their shape and they don't release a lot of starch. So you're going to cut up 3 potatoes, about 1-inch pieces. You're going to take a large onion and dice it. I've got a cup of frozen corn here. I've got just under a pound of haddock. You can certainly add as much as you like. This soup could easily be turned into clam chowder by replacing the haddock or the fish with a can or 2 of chopped clams and a bottle of clam broth. But for today, we're just going to be using haddock. All right, once your butter has finished melting, remember you're doing this over low heat. We don't want to use a lot of high heat here because we don't want things to brown too much. We're looking for a white soup, so we don't want chunks of caramelized onion in here. So we're going to add the onions and we're going to cook them until they start to sweat, which means they start to release some of their moisture. And one of the best ways to do that is to add salt now while they're cooking. That salt is going to draw the moisture out of the onions naturally. So we'll start with a couple generous pinches of salt and let that draw the moisture out of our onions. And we'll just let them cook on low heat until they start to soften and turn translucent. All right, so let's check out our onions. You can see here now that they are starting to sweat and turn translucent. They're not frying or getting any color. They're only just starting to lose that opaqueness. That's called translucence when we're talking about onions. They get very fragrant and sweet when they're like this. You can see the butter foaming in there as well. So now that we're at this point, we're going to add our potatoes. We're going to stir them to coat with all the butter and onions. And then we're going to add just enough water to cover the potatoes by about 1/2 inch, maybe even less. The less water you add, the more flavorful your soup will be. If you add too much water, it sort of dilutes it. We're adding this to cook the potatoes. Once the potatoes are tender, that's when we add the more delicate stuff, so the milk and the fish. So you can see there's barely any water covering those potatoes. So then we'll put a lid on that, and we'll turn the heat up, and we'll bring it up to a simmer and let those potatoes cook. And while that's happening, we'll come over here and check out our fish. So when you're buying fish, some people are scared to buy fish, but what you really want to do, and don't be scared to do this, is ask the person at the fish counter if you can smell the fish. And I know that sounds really funny, but fish that is good shouldn't have a fishy odor. It should just smell like fresh, sort of oceany smell. So it should also be glossy, it shouldn't be sticky, and it shouldn't look too dry. Okay, so this is haddock. This is the skin side of the haddock, and this is one side of the fish. This is the tail end here. This is where the head would have been. So, and this is the belly. So if you can picture it swimming, right? There's your fish. This whole piece is going to get put right into the soup because when fish cooks, it flakes apart into pieces, which is what we're looking for here. We're using very gentle heat to cook this fish because we don't want to overcook it. We just want to get it to where it's just falling apart. And that will be all we need to do for our fish. The next thing you need is a can of evaporated milk. You can certainly use low-fat versions of this, but you want to shake it well. Basically, a lot of the moisture has been removed. About 40% of moisture has been removed from the milk before they canned it, so it keeps better. The more liquid is in something, the better the chance it can go bad. So when you remove moisture, you actually reduce the chance of things going rancid or going sour. So I shook it, and now I'm going to open it, and this is called, well, I always called it a church key. Basically, you take the pointy end, and you pierce one side of the can, then you do the opposite side, and what that does is allow airflow. So the air comes in this side and pushes the milk out the other side, and allows you to pour out of the can without having to open the whole can and potentially spill it. Certainly, if you don't have one of these, you can just use a can opener and cut a slit on either side, and you'll get the same effect. All right, our potatoes are cooking away. I brought them up to a boil, and then I'm going to turn the heat down, reduce it to a simmer, but I'm going to keep that lid on. Keep all that heat and that moisture in there. And then we're just going to wait until the potatoes are fork tender. That means a fork pressed into them goes in easily. So our potatoes are pretty much fork tender. They're maybe a little bit on the al dente side, but if we go in, the fork goes through them easily with just a little bit of resistance. And what I want you to notice here is how milky looking the water is at this point. You can see when I move the potatoes that the water is starchy. Okay, so that's going to help thicken our soup and give it a really nice mouthfeel. So this is the point where we're going to take our haddock and we can just put the whole piece in. It'll all just fall apart once it's in there. And this is using gentle steam heat to break down the fish. So this is it's a cross between poaching and maybe braising, the way it's laying on top. And we're going to put the lid back on and let it simmer. We don't really want to boil it too hard. We don't want to break all the potatoes up. It's been about 3 minutes, so let's check on the fish. You can already see that it's starting to get opaque around the edges, and look, it's already starting to flake apart a little bit. You want all this part to cook all the way through as well. But again, it really doesn't take long, especially with a thinner fillet like haddock. If you're using cod, it might take a little bit longer. And at this point, I'm going to add the corn. It's going to bring the temperature down a little bit, but that's okay. We want to get it cooked through. Just mix it in. We'll just let that go for a couple more minutes. The fish is very close. All right, it's been a few minutes again. We're going to check out our fish. Remember, we're looking for it just to flake apart. So you can see here that it's just coming apart. So that's what we want. So now we're going to add our milk. And right now I'm somewhere between medium and medium-low heat. So we're going to add the milk in, and we don't want to boil it because the milk stands a chance of breaking that, and then you have like curdled soup, and that's gross. So you're just going to give it a quick stir. The fish is going to break up, and that's what you're looking for. And we're going to season it with a bit more salt. I'm using kosher salt here, Diamond Crystal. And then we're going to add some black pepper. And we're just going to let it warm through. At this point, it's pretty much done. We just want the milk to heat up. So I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit. And one more thing I'm going to add is a pinch of thyme. Add a touch of thyme and you're all set.